Hello everyone, I wish you a joyful and healthy day. Here are the main contents in the video. The coordinates have been identified and the countdown clock is ticking towards a global showdown. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and the United States Central Command, CENTCOM, have announced that they have precisely located every gram of dangerous material. A countdown clock toward a large-scale war has officially begun. The desperate silver wing of Tehran, the hidden Pickaxe fortress before the verdict from the B-2 squadron, an unexpected diplomatic breakthrough from the Central Asian steppes has emerged as Kazakh volunteers to take over the Uranium warehouse. But a firm shake of the head from the Tehran palace has pushed this nation into a corner. The resolute decision to keep this deadly asset deep beneath 85 meters of granite at the underground Pickaxe mountain base is a self-destructive survival instinct. Or it's basically a death warrant for the squadrons, even those with America's strategic B-2 Spirit bombers. A tight net over the Strait of Hormuz, causing a domino crisis up to NATO's borders. The Electronic Warfare Network, the GC-135D rivet joint, the F-35 conductor, and the early warning F-22 Raptor are tightening the encirclement around the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, tensions in the West are reaching a new, dangerous level. Here is the content in detailed analysis. The Uranium Pickaxe base has fallen into the deadly P-2 trap. The U.S. Air Force is tightening control at Hormuz. Ladies and gentlemen, the global geopolitical chessboard in the middle of 2026 is witnessing a fierce upheaval, pushing humanity to the brink of a life-and-death confrontation. At the center of this underground storm is the shocking information about a massive amount of up to 440 kilon of uranium enriched to 6 levels close to weapons grade. With a purity level of about 60, it is currently being secretly hidden underground in Iran. With this strategic stockpile, Iran theoretically has enough material to establish a nuclear arsenal of 11 warheads, a fragile threshold that could completely upend the global balance of power. During this tense situation, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and United States Central Command, CENTCOM, announced they have accurately located every gram of this dangerous material. Observers believe that this is no longer just a routine diplomatic warning, but rather a list of military targets that has already been established, accompanied by a countdown clock ticking toward a large-scale war. Under the intense pressure of sanctions and the threat of armed conflict, an unexpected diplomatic breakthrough emerged from the Central Asian steppes, turning all the usual calculations of the major powers upside down. IA Director General Mr. Zafran Grossi made an emergency visit to the capital Astana to hold direct talks with the President of Kazakhstan, Mr. Kassym-Jomart. Here, Kazakhstan made a groundbreaking official proposal by volunteering to become the intermediary country to receive and store Iran's entire stockpile of enriched uranium on its territory. This is not a random reaction from an unknown country on the energy map, because Kazakhstan currently accounts for up to 38.6% of global uranium production, was the host of historic negotiations between the P5+1 group in Iran in 2013, and is also the only country in the world operating the IRA's nuclear fuel bank. Strategically, Astana possesses both the legal status and practical capability to serve as a neutral and reputable manager for this most dangerous material on the planet. However, the prospect of a peaceful solution was quickly extinguished by a firm rejection from the palace in Tehran. Iran's Supreme Leader, Mr. Murtaba Khamenei, issued a strict internal directive, affirming that this nuclear stockpile must absolutely not be allowed to leave the country's borders. Leaked information from high-level sources in Iran indicates that the country's leadership officially rejected the agreement 9 days ago and is continuing to sink deeper into a dangerous gamble. Every statement coming out of Tehran at this time, whether from the Supreme Leader himself or from his inner circle manipulating his media channels, is like an anonymous figure taking control of communication channels to broadcast provocative messages, clearly reflecting the militaristic and authoritarian mindset of an extremist regime. They see handing over uranium as equivalent to strategic suicide and believe that keeping this asset, along with the threat of weaponizing it, is like holding a loaded gun over the world's head to protect the regime from an attack. This is no longer the logic of a civilian nuclear program serving infrastructure energy needs, but rather the destructive self-preservation instinct of extremist Islamic clerics. These unpredictable entities are ready to use advanced weapons for international blackmail. Behind the diplomatic statements, the American war machine has begun to rumble into motion with an action plan that is no longer hypothetical. The most advanced reconnaissance aircraft of the United States have been deployed, using specialized sensor systems to search for and identify every trace of missile launches from the air. The focus of the airstrike plans now converges on the underground base at Mount Pickaxe, a massive fortified structure built more than 85 meters below ground. This depth far exceeds the targets that were attacked in April 2002 during the intense 12-day war. At that time, during the Midnight Hammer campaign, the U.S. military penetrated the ventilation systems to directly destroy the centrifuges inside the uranium storage bunker. Now, Mount Pickaxe represents a much more complex defensive fortress, where what Iran calls priceless treasures, in the eyes of the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, and are just target coordinates waiting for the day to be struck with overwhelming force. The stalemate in the Middle East is causing a chain reaction, igniting hotspots of conflict around the globe as the world order faces serious challenges. While all eyes are focused on the region, the U.S. Southern Command, CENTCOM, has just carried out a successful operation to destroy a large-scale semi-submersible drug trafficking vessel, affirming control over strategic maritime routes. U.S. Secretary of Defense Peter Hessel, speaking before defense ministers from 40 countries at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, issued a chilling warning that the United States has more than enough capability to resume devastating airstrikes, and that the superpower's strategic arsenal is fully prepared for decisive operations to thoroughly resolve the nuclear threat. While rumors are spreading across the internet about the U.S. arsenal running out, military analysts understand that the reality is much more complex than that. Although the stockpile of munitions has decreased compared to the period before the conflict, the U.S. defense industrial machine is ramping up at a rapid pace to make up for the gap. As for the Tomahawk cruise missile line, the journey to restore its golden stockpile levels, as before the war, will certainly take more time. This is a complex topic in terms of military logistics that in-depth analysts always have to thoroughly dissect in order to provide a comprehensive view of the true strength of these strategic stockpiles. On the diplomatic chessboard, President Donald Trump, although he agreed to extend the ceasefire indefinitely, decided to maintain an absolute maritime blockade until the negotiation process concluded, delivering a fatal blow to Tehran's lifeline. With each passing day, the regime of the clerics and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran is being further strangled. They are witnessing enormous revenues of up to $500 million from oil evaporate from their bank accounts. When that lifeline of dirty money is completely cut off, even members of the IRGC will no longer receive their salaries. Backed into a corner, the mid-level leaders and sect heads in Iran are now no different from mafia bosses desperately craving money, frantically looking for ways to extort and squeeze their own people just to survive. Confusion and suspicion have started to arise from within the system itself, raising big questions about the loyalty of subordinates when the economic incentives are gone. In that suffocating atmosphere, Tehran's growing paranoia becomes even more apparent as they stubbornly reject Kazakhstan's offer to safeguard their uranium, choosing instead to cling tightly to this deadly material like a weapon kept right by their bedside for protection. What is happening in Iran's media strategy is proof of a desperate act. Mr. Mohsen Zizai, senior advisor to Supreme Leader Khamenei, former IRGC commander, and currently the chief architect directing Iran's diplomatic and public campaigns, took to social network X to accuse President Khamenei of having no genuine intention to negotiate and instead pursuing other schemes, while also criticizing Washington for betraying diplomacy for the third time. In response, the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also declared that there would be no final agreement unless the maritime blockade is lifted first. Tehran is stirring up trouble to blackmail and create a smokescreen, insisting the U.S. abandon its strongest weapon before considering any concessions. But in reality, the situation shows that Iran's position has developed critical cracks that cannot be repaired. Their entire air defense network was shattered in March, the missile production leadership was completely eliminated, and the nuclear infrastructure was hit by as many as 14 massive bunker-busting bombs. The 440 kilo of uranium and the threat to block the Strait of Hormuz are Tehran's last dominoes in their desperate gambit. But America's B-2 strategic bombers have never hesitated in high-stakes gambles. While the war of words continues both in the air and online, the massive intelligence apparatus of the U.S. military has never stopped for a second in updating plans to destroy targets. The first surveillance layer was established by the electronic ghosts of VC-13, already in position. With only 22 units in the entire U.S. Air Force, 4 of them have been deployed close to the area to carry out the most sophisticated signal intelligence missions. This year, the RC-135s have been flying continuously, silently sweeping up all electronic emissions across Iran's nuclear network, from secret conversations between enrichment facilities to the distinctive electrical signatures of operating centrifuges, and even fake radar signals from convoys transporting materials. Every slightest movement of the uranium stockpile is recorded in real time and fed straight into the targeting chain. Right behind them, the second surveillance layer consists of F-35A superfighters, whose combat history is still marked by the Midnight Hammer operation last June. These F-35A squadrons will be the first force to tear through the skies of Iran. The complete neutralization of enemy air defense systems is thanks to the overwhelming power of the AN and APG-81 active electronically scanned array radar, the DIS distributed electro-optical surveillance system, and the most advanced electronic warfare suite, all ready to pave the way for the final firestorm. In the blazing skies over the Gulf, the F-35 stealth fighters are establishing absolute dominance, like invisible phantoms able to freely decide the fate of any airspace they pass through. They are not only the vanguard forces paving the way, but also the last ones to leave the battlefield, just as happened in the terrifying Operation Epic Way. Now, these cutting-edge weapons are carrying out continuous patrol missions over the Strait of Hormuz. The F-35 acts like a conductor coordinating the entire force, collecting and distributing real-time target data to the entire coalition force. If in the world of military technology, hypothetical fighter models like the F-47 are considered the ultimate battlefield monsters, then the F-35 is the brain that shapes the situation. Working together with that network is the strict protective layer from the fearsome F-22 Raptor, deployed from eastern Israel and spread throughout the area to dominate the skies, eliminate all threats, and even possess the capability to intercept ballistic missiles. Acting as a supreme commander, it both directs the formation and directly escorts the squad around the area. Behind the velvet curtain of that confrontation lurks the faceless Reaper, the elusive B-2 Spirit bomber. That is the weapon of destruction, silent, carrying 30,000 pounds of super-penetrating bombs. It will be the one to deliver the final verdict if diplomatic agreements with Kazakhstan completely collapse and Iran decides to bury its nuclear ambitions in Rocky Mountains. Tehran has tried to bury their uranium stockpile deep under 85 meters of solid granite, and the United States Central Command, CENTCOM, has announced that it has already mapped out a fateful flight path cutting straight across the summit of that majestic mountain range. In this multi-dimensional strategic chess game, analysts have begun to see the true nature behind Tehran's rejection of the mediation agreement from Kazakhstan. For Iran, keeping 440 kilograms of enriched uranium is not necessarily to immediately build an atomic bomb, because they deeply understand that the moment a nuclear warhead appears, B-2 Spirit bombers will take off carrying bunker buster bombs that can penetrate deep underground within just a few minutes. What Iran desires is a guarantee of institutional survival, an ultimate deterrent tool at the negotiating table to force Washington to continue the dialogue. Because they fear that once this treasure leaves the country, they will lose the only card that gives them leverage in post-war settlements. On the other hand, President Donald Trump's calculated 60-day extension order is a calculated psychological squeeze on the opponent. The maritime blockade remains in place, bomber squadrons are kept on combat readiness, and both economic and military pressure are being pushed to the maximum, all aimed at forcing Tehran into a substantive negotiation process. The fracture of the world order is not limited to the Middle East, but is leading to bloody consequences around the globe, exposing the extreme instability of contemporary geopolitics. In the Eastern Pacific Ocean, the Combined Task Force under the United States Southern Command, SOUTHCOM, has just delivered a thunderous blow to the transnational drug empire through Operation Southern Spear, intercepting a smuggling submarine to increase absolute deterrent pressure on criminal gangs. The images and detailed analysis of this deterrent airstrike reflect the reality that criminal networks will continue to fight back recklessly because they have no way out, forcing security forces to maintain continuous manhunt operations. However, a greater tragedy is unfolding on the edge of Europe, as the Kremlin's war begins to spill over the borders of sovereign nations. A Russian drone in a long-range airstrike targeting Ukraine lost control and crashed directly into an apartment building in the city of Galati, Romania, an official member of the NATO alliance, injuring 2 civilians and forcing the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to issue a strong condemnation of this serious violation of international law. Amid the smoke and gunfire, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine also issued a chilling warning about a large-scale firestorm about to strike with drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles within the next 24 to 36 hours. NATO's air defense network across Europe has been placed on red alert, clear evidence that the current air war is no longer confined within Ukraine's borders, but is evolving into a global threat. So, in your opinion, is this Israel's last diplomatic opportunity, or will Iran allow the B-2 squadrons to prepare for a devastating airstrike on Mount Pickaxe? And will Iran hand over its uranium to Kazakhstan to save its strangled economy? Or will it continue to cling to the nuclear gamble, risking the survival of the regime?